Good afternoon. My name is Brandon Carter. I'm an application engineer with Allied PROLIM Solutions. Hope everyone is doing well today. I want to welcome all of you to our Allied PROLIM NX Lunch Bytes series. I think most of you that are on today are aware of what Lunch Bytes are. If you are new, Lunch Bytes are sessions where we cover a topic, maybe a command or a tool that users may not be aware of. Because several of you have started loading NX9, we want to cover what's new in NX9 today. We want our lunch bites to be valuable to you, so please let us hear your suggestions on topics, and if you could send those to us via email or on our website, that would be great. If you have any questions regarding today's session, please just write them down and send them in an email. There are several of you on the line with us today, therefore you'll be in listen-only mode. Today's topic is on what's new in NX9 CAD. We're going to break this topic into two sessions. We're going to do half of the session today over the next 30, maybe 40 minutes, and then part 2 will conclude on May 22nd. Our goal today is to give you some insight on what's new in NX9 CAD. There are many more items that are new, but we're going to focus our time in the next two sessions with some tools that will help with productivity, and they're everyday type tools, so no matter what types of parts and assemblies you design, they should help you. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So here's the agenda for what I have planned. Part 1 today will look in the areas of user interface, sketching, modeling, and synchronous modeling. And then on May 22nd, we'll conclude with sheet metal, assemblies, drafting, and some other items. So to get us started, what's new in NX9 CAD? We're going to start with the user interface. There is a change to the ribbon layout. There's some different themes, so it's going to make NX look a little different. And you see I have NX 9.0.1 on there for a reason. There's new border bars, which are just custom toolbars that we can customize. The File tab, use of the more flyouts, and Command Finder. And looking at this list, you may not have any idea what I'm talking about, but I'm going to explain. So first of all, you do see that we have a new user interface here with NX9. This screenshot I actually took with a 9.0.1, which would be the first maintenance release of NX9. Notice the light theme, and I'm going to talk more detail about that. Just so you know, I'm just going through a few slides here, and I will show you some items inside of NX here in a minute. But yes, you do notice there are now a ribbon type interface where you see home, assemblies, the different tabs. As far as the themes go, you notice the light colored theme here. This is light recommended. This is the default when you install maintenance release 1. So you see I have version 9.0.1, and you'll see that that is changed, or where you change that is underneath the preferences and user interface. When you first load the base release of NX9, which would be 9.0.0, you'll notice kind of the same gray, dark, maybe even black background with the new ribbon tabs. Underneath user interface, you'll see the theme. It's set to classic, so you can change it from classic to light, and depending on what version of NX you're running, whether it's 9.0.0 or 9.0.1, will be where you have the light versus the classic theme loaded. Here you see there's a new quick access toolbar that goes along with the ribbon theme. You see it's across the top here where you see NX, and then tools like save, undo, redo, and switching windows are up there. This toolbar is completely customizable. You'll see underneath the customize area, it'll say QAT, which stands for quick access toolbar, plus something called border bars, which you'll see a little bit later. You can obviously hide and show those particular toolbars. And then we can also find commands and obviously add and remove content to those toolbars. Excuse me. The border bars are new in NX9. You'll see down here in this screenshot across the top here of the graphics area of the interface, you'll see all your different selection tools, your key point snaps, and that's actually on what's called the top border bar. You'll see that you have an option to customize content on the right border bar. There'd be a left border bar and a bottom border bar. It's very easy to add content. You can, add it through the customize dialog as you see here, but I'll also show you later you can right click on content and add it to particular toolbars. Underneath the File tab, this is very similar to the File pull-down menu that you may be familiar with. You'll also notice underneath File, this is where, out of the box anyway, you can switch your different applications from modeling to sheet metal, etc. You can also turn on a tab called Application, which is what I've done, which will also allow you to switch your environments. But just notice this File tab is what you would expect, new open, your helps down there, your import, export, and then you'll see up here, which is a little different, is preferences. So here I see modeling, which tells me I'm in the modeling environment, so it takes me right to modeling preferences, but then you can also get to all preferences for user interface, visualization, and so forth. Also, when you start looking at these tabs, you'll see that there's a more flyout. Notice all the content, or a lot of content, is on the more flyout, so make sure you take advantage of that drop down. And because the user interface has changed a little bit, do not forget about Command Finder. Yes, you may have used Command Finder when you were a new user to NX to help try to learn what the new tools are in NX, and map them to what you know from your other CAD system. But take advantage of Command Finder. The user interface has changed a little bit. Don't spend all day hunting and pecking. Use Command Finder, and it'll help you learn the location much easier. It'll also give you description, whether it's on a right border bar, which I customize here. But anyway, you get the idea. Make sure you take advantage of Command Finder. So let's take a look at a few of those items. I don't want this to turn into a whole 30-minute session on what's new in the user interface. I just want to point out some of the behavior with the new user interface. So first of all, you will notice the different tabs, home, curve, etc. I encourage you to investigate those. Here are the more flyouts I showed you on the slides. So underneath detail feature, design feature, you'll see how those are categorized. The other thing I want to point out is you may be wondering where your pull down menus are. If I hit this menu button over here, you see my full set of pull down menus still exist. So there's my file menu, there's the familiar insert menu if I'm going to insert a design feature. You see that list, and this is still driven by roles. So don't forget about your user interface roles, right? I'm talking about these guys over here. The other thing I mentioned that is new besides the format of the user interface is here you see the quick access toolbar. So out of the box you see things like save, undo, redo, being able to switch windows, also get into other menus here, you'll see that. Also, if I hover my cursor over top of the tabs, if I scroll my scroll wheel, I can actually scroll between the tabs. If you're familiar with a ribbon type interface, if you use Microsoft Office products, Excel, Word, etc., you're probably already used to tabs that kind of look like this. So this was a quick access toolbar. You'll see where my selection items are, your key point snaps. You also see that there's some visualization tools that you may be used to. The top toolbar are now here. This is actually called the top border bar. If I come over here to File, you'll see this is the File tab I showed you the slide of. Here are the preferences. Because I'm in modeling, you see here's the modeling preferences. If I go to All Preferences, you'll see the drop down that you used to see underneath the Preferences pull down menu. So if I needed to come over here and find, for example, Preferences User Interface, since we're talking about that, I can get there from there. If I go to Layout, this is where I showed you the options between the themes. Now I have 9.0.1, the first maintenance release, loaded, so it created this, or loaded this light recommended theme, which is the white background and so forth. If I change this to classic and hit apply, you'll see that it goes back to the normal look of 8.5 as far as the color scheme, but you'll see it does have the new ribbon user interface that we see in 9. So I'm going to go ahead and switch this back to light. The other thing you will see here underneath user interface environment, you see ribbon bar and classic toolbar. So ribbon bar is the new NX9 user interface. For this release, maybe 2, you can switch back to classic toolbars. So when I change that and I change this to classic, you'll see that it looks like it did in 8.5. Now I encourage you to look at the ribbon bar, use the ribbon bar, use Command Finder to help find tools, because this option to switch back is not going to be there forever. So it's giving you a little bit of transition time when you load NX9 to get used to the new ribbon interface, but have the ability to switch back to classic. And there is controls, global controls, and custom defaults to set that option. But be aware that's not going to be there moving forward. It's just kind of a transition period. Okay, going back to the border bar and the quick access toolbar at the top, if I come down here to customize, you'll see here's the QAT border bars. I can hide and show those. You'll see now you see these border bars. I do not have anything custom. Here's the right, here's the top, I'm sorry, the left. Across the top is where all the selection content is, so I can add to that. Everything's very similar in here, except everything is grouped by ribbons instead of your different toolbars. Okay, so I can add content. If I go in here to the commands and I come in here and find, I don't know, what do we want to find? Maybe extrude. Maybe I want to do this whole extrude drop down. I can just drag and drop, and you notice the border bar there. Maybe I want whole to be over here and pattern. So if I close that out, now you see I have a right border bar, which is just another area for a toolbar. I could come in here and access those commands. Also, you'll see that if I do use Command Finder, I want to find the command block. Just like before, it shows me where the command is. Here, I currently have it hidden, but if I hit this drop down, I can actually add it to a ribbon. I can add it to the quick access toolbar. I can add it to the right border bar, and you'll notice how that shows up. You'll also notice that I can right click on commands and say add them to the quick access, the top, and so forth without going all the way into customize. So if there's a command that you use often, you can right click and add it to the specific area. You know, for example, maybe the quick access toolbar, the right border bar, the left border bar, top, and so forth. So just be aware that you have a lot of flexibility with this ribbon, new ribbon user interface. Alright, like I said, I don't want to turn this into a whole 30 minutes on the user interface. We're talking about doing a lunch Bytes by itself just on the user interface at a later date. So keep that in mind. I just want to point out some new things, just how to navigate, and just some general customization stuff to make you aware when you first go into NX9. Alright, the next section we want to look at is sketching. I have 2 items listed here. Like I said, there's more. I just kind of went through and picked what I thought was the top few to try to get it fit in a couple of 30-minute sessions. First thing we're going to look at is rigid sketch, and then there's also a 2D synchronous idea. I'm going to hold off talking about the 2D synchronous till later on in the 30 minutes when I talk about synchronous modeling as a whole, so I'll cover the 2D synchronous at that point. So for this, we just want to look at the new rigid sketch idea. When we create a new sketch group, we can now have an option to rigidly constrain it. So as those lines, arcs, 2D geometry sits, they can behave as one entity, one element. So let's take a look at that. Alright, here I have a sketch, kind of this slider crank, kind of figuring out the layout. Right now I do have the rigid constraints on there, so if I come over here and just pull this one line, you'll see that I can move that around. Okay, now there's also an option to come over here and let's pick on this rigid constraint and make it active. So with the active, I can go ahead and drive some geometry, and you'll see that what I'm dealing with here are just groups. So here's an active group called crank, which is these lines and arcs, link, and so forth. If I want to inactivate that and kind of go back without the dimension, if I click on this line, there's a nice little tool I've turned on. It's called up one level, and it says selects object one level up in hierarchy. If components or groups are enabled for the operation. So this is part of a group. See how it grabbed all that geometry? So then I can right click and turn off the active. So see how the dimension's gone, but I did increase the length. So this is really just grouping geometry together, whether they have constraints or not, and have them behave as one entity. How you create this, if I come up here and let's just ungroup this. Alright, so it's back to being lines and arcs. It's not part of a group. If I grab the geometry that I want to be part of the group, so I'm going to grab the lines, the arcs, come up here and grab this arc. If I right click and say new sketch group, you'll see here's where I can make it rigidly constrained. I can go ahead and give it a name if I want. Now you see that rigid constraint and how it's going to behave as one element. If I create something here, maybe some kind of shape, and yes, it's inferring some constraints, but notice I haven't added any dimensions or constrained it. If I go ahead and grab all that geometry and create a new sketch group and make it rigidly constrained, you'll see how it moves as one element. I can't change the size of it. It's moving just as one element, and there's the handle for a rigid constraint. Alright, the next area we want to talk about is modeling. So I'm not going to PowerPoint you through these just to save a little bit of time, but just to give you a list of what we're going to talk about. You'll see there's a new rib feature, some more selection intent. For example, when we create edge blends, something called feature intersection edges. Draft by stationary end parting face, so that's together. Edit Boolean, how we can analyze or create blends for pockets, and this is good for design for manufacturing. Can we actually make that pocket? And then finally, blend corner. Alright, so let me come over here and grab another part. The first thing we want to look at is the rib command. And this rib command, let me go ahead and hide the datum planes, but you see that I've created a couple sketches on some datum planes there. Alright, so the new rib command. The rib command takes advantage of some things you saw in 8.5 with extrude, where you have the open volume target, where you have an open profile and it'll actually go ahead and boolean to the existing target. So right now it's grabbing the base as the target body, and I'm just going to come in here and grab this existing sketch. What it's going to do is say, well, what do you want the thickness of this rib to be, this strengthening rib to be? Do you want it to be symmetric or asymmetric, meaning one side about the line, the profile, or symmetric to it? This here is basically the Boolean option. You have the combine, so this will be one solid body. If I uncheck that, this would be two separate solid bodies. Notice the option here for the walls, perpendicular, how it projects down, and for this particular sketch, if I turn it to parallel, see how it wants to extend back till it meets material. That's what the rib's trying to do. Basically, you're creating a sketch, a profile, out in space and projecting back till it meets material. There's also options to create draft on the fly, and also an option here. Right now, this sketch is, so far above this particular face. So if I come in here and change from selected, I can actually say where the rib is going to start, and then you can have an optional offset in there. So I've grabbed this face, say offset it a ½ an inch or so below that face, and the sketch is driving the shape of it. So you have that option. If I go ahead and suppress that rib and go ahead and create one in the other direction, so if I go to rib and grab this, you'll see how it extends till it meets material, and then it extends back in the third dimension there, if you will, till it meets material there. Same thing here, I can add draft, or I can do from a selected cap face and have an offset. If I change it to parallel, see how it's going to go ahead and extend down in that direction. Back to perpendicular, it's going to extend in that direction. Like I said, I do have control over the offset. So that's the new rib command. Let me give you another example of that. So here I have a couple sketches. I won't talk about it as much, but if I go to rib, I have feature curves that I'm going to use here. So I'm going to grab that entire sketch. Notice how it creates those ribs and extends till it meets geometry. You know, even down here where this blend, this radius is. If I come over here and grab this set of feature curves, you'll notice that it creates those ribs. So it's taken advantage of open profiles, which was introduced in Extrude in 8.5, and now it's a separate rib command. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is some selection intent. I'm going to come in here and look at the handle of this screwdriver. And you'll see I have a sketch and I need to extrude basically this kind of texture, if you will, off of that face. So I'm just going to come up here and extrude that sketch. And it's set to unite. Now if I want to add some blends, let me come over here and turn off the that particular sketch. I have sketches on different layers. If I come over here and add some edge blends, here's a new filter called Feature Intersection Edges. So if I come over here and grab this feature, where it intersects the face, you see how it's going to add a blend. All right? So it's a nice, quick way to add those blends in this case, but also what happens if I edit that particular feature. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on another sketch, turn on layer 20 here, and if I edit the extrude, deselect the original sketch and grab the new sketch, notice how those edge blends update, because it's just looking where the feature intersects that face. So keep in mind that filter. So it's a nice way of grabbing multiple edges, but it's also a nice way if something changes and it'll update, because it's not looking for a specific edge, it's looking where that feature meets the adjacent face. Alright, the next thing we'll look at is a draft enhancement. So one, just to compare, just to get you thinking, if I look at this handle, I'm going to get rid of a couple of edge blends. I need to add some draft. So here I have a surface. This is going to be my parting surface I want to draft from. So if I go to draft, in 8.5 we had stationary face, parting face. You'll see this option new, which says stationary and parting face. So just to compare what we had before, if I click on parting face, grab that surface, maybe I want to draft both sides, kind of a symmetric draft. Let me go ahead and pick this face and this face to actually draft. So if I go ahead and hide this surface, you'll see that we took that surface to add draft from, and I did to both sides 8 degrees. So we've had that. If I come in here to this other part on the end, you'll see that I have this datum plane set up, and we want to do some draft with these faces here, these kind of horizontal faces. Alright, so I'm going to come in here to draft. First of all, I need to change my draft direction. I don't want it drafting in that because I need these faces to rotate. So I'm going to change my draw direction in that direction, which is Y. Let's look at the new option. It says stationary and parting together. Okay, so first of all, what's going to hold? What's going to be stationary? And I'm going to come in here and grab a couple key points where that blend is, that radius. So that's what's going to hold, and where it's going to actually split the draft, for lack of a better term, I can click select parting face, which is this datum plane, and you'll notice that once I pick my faces to draft, these are the faces it's drafting, and where that plane intersects, that's where it's going to split. So it's holding up here at these edges, and that's where it's going to split. If I want to draft that outwards in this case, you'll see that I can create a shape like that using both stationary and parting. Parting is where it's going to split, stationary is where it's going to hold. So just to show you that they have that new option in draft, kind of combining stationary and parting for the same operation. Okay, the next thing is a simple enhancement, but it can be very handy. Here I just have two separate bodies, extrude 1's the base plate and extrude 2. Notice how extrude 2 actually intersects inside of extrude 1. So if I come up here and do a simple unite, target to tool, those are now united. But what if I decided, hey, I wanted to subtract? The only way to do that before would be to delete the unite and then create a subtract. Now I can right click and say convert to subtract. Now it's a subtract Boolean operation, which therefore is removing material. I can also convert that back to unite. So it's just a handy little toggle switch to be able to convert from unite to subtract. The next thing we want to take a look at is the blend pockets. So first of all, you'll see that I have this pocket and I have this feature down here in the pocket. There's draft associated with the pocket. First, I want to look at, how am I going to manufacture this? If I go to analysis and I go to analyze pockets, you'll see that there's a command that comes up and says select a pocket floor. So it's going to grab the sidewalls. And what we're doing is saying, well, I want to cut this pocket with a specific tool of certain size. So I've kept a really large diameter here just to show you this. Just give me the feedback. What this is going to do is look and see if a radius can be put around the floor or certain inside edges. And it's going to use checkmate to give me the feedback. So we ran that check, and here it's going to show me where a couple faces where that tool would not be accessible. So if I just use checkmate and show information on that, if I come in here and focus the view, kind of zoom up on there, you'll see that between these two faces that tool will not fit through there. So it's giving me the feedback. So I just want you to be aware that there's a new analyze pocket. Okay, it's designed for manufacturability, so keep that in mind. To take that a step farther, if I deactivate checkmate, I can also now create a blend pocket. Okay, so what that means, same thing, but now we're actually going to create the blends on that pocket and create the geometry. So if I grab the bottom face, it picks my wall faces. What tool do I want to use? What's the diameter I'm going to use? And then here, you'll notice the tooltips are showing you exactly what you're going to get. So here's a swarf cut with a wall. So it's going to cut the floor until tangent. No sharp edge. Here's cut floor and swarf cut. Here's cut floor only. And here's swarf cut wall and floor. So depending on what you want to do with the tool, we're going to help determine the actual geometry, the blends that are created there. So if I go ahead and hit OK, notice how it put those blends in there inside the pocket. Now you may be saying, why did it not do this edge? Well, that's an outside edge, so to speak, rather than an inside edge. So any tool would fit around that edge. Okay. If I wanted to add a blend there, I could go ahead and add that blend first. So if I come back and make this the current feature, go ahead and come in here and blend that guy. Then make the blend pocket the current feature. You'll see there's my result. So that's analyze blend pocket, or analyze pocket. Right, and then a new blend pocket to actually create the radius values. Okay, the next thing, first time I saw this command in this example, I thought this was really neat. Have a new tool called blend corner. So I could customize this with the interface wherever I want, but if I go to insert and do a detail feature, you'll see that here is blend corner. So what we're going to do, you'll notice this corner patch here where these blends intersect is very ugly, right? All these little slivers, how it comes together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and add these blends as different sets. So what it's doing is it's calculating how we need to create the new clean patch and how that corner is going to look. You have control about how tangency adjusts, but just notice how it's nice and clean. It basically replaced that corner by doing this blend corner operation. So it's very, very handy, very nice tool. So I just want to make you aware of that, and that's called blend corner. Okay, so that's what's new in modeling. Like I said, there's many more. The next thing we're going to talk about here is synchronous modeling, and like I said, part of that is the 2D synchronous tools that I said we could have covered during Sketch, but I wanted to kind of keep all the synchronous ideas together. The 2D synchronous tools, while we're in a sketch, editing a sketch, creating a sketch, etc., are items like move curve, offset move curve, resize curve, and delete curve. The key word meaning curve, so it's sketch entity, a 2D entity. So everything that we've been doing with synchronous modeling and synchronous technology, move face, offset face, delete face, those face operations, those ideas are now being used in the sketch. The other thing that's been added as far as 3D synchronous modeling, instead of having move face, offset face like I just mentioned, now there's move edge and offset edge. So this allows you to drive just an edge and then the face adapt by how that face is moved, or I'm sorry, that edge is moved. So I'll show you some examples there. The other thing is underneath delete face, there's a new option called blend size. So I can actually type in a blend size, and anything that is smaller than that blend size, it will find on the part and try to delete it. Just like delete face, it'll have to be able to heal and stitch that, but it's a nice selection tool so we don't have to go through and click all those faces. I'm not going to demonstrate this for you, but just to make you aware that there is the blend size underneath delete face. So let's go ahead and talk about the 2D synchronous and the move edge and offset edge. Let's go ahead and start with the move edge, offset edge. I'm just going to grab this part that you saw on the slide. Alright, so if you're not familiar with synchronous modeling, I encourage you to check out our synchronous modeling lunch bites. I believe we had a part 1 and part 2 on that, and that's just on our website. We'll talk about replays later if you're not familiar. But underneath my synchronous modeling tools, here are the new ones for NX9. You have move edge and offset edge. If I go to move edge, well, first of all, maybe I should compare it. If I go to move face, I have this nice, simple, planar face. Right? If I move an entire face, I can move it up and down or in a certain direction, a certain value. But it's the entire face. If I come up here and do a move edge, if I start to pull that edge down, notice how I'm just driving the edge, the topology of the edge, and see how the face needs to adapt to create that. So if I move this down a half an inch, you see we move the edge. You can zoom up on there, you'll see how it has this kind of taper to it because we just drove the edge. Right? There's times where you just say, hey, I'm going to move that edge, and I need that desired result. So that's move edge. Offset edge, if I did an offset edge on a similar edge like that, then it would be the same result as a move edge. However, if I hit cancel on that, if I come around here to the back, where offset edge is very handy, if I come in here and grab this edge, you'll see how I can build taper to that shape very, very quickly. So just to give you a couple of quick examples, and more importantly, make sure you're aware that there's a new move edge and offset edge. So we're driving edges with synchronous modeling rather than just faces in synchronous modeling. Like I said, the other thing from a synchronous perspective is what's called 2D synchronous. So I have a sketch. I'm going to go ahead and edit into this sketch. We're going to talk about a couple different scenarios. This sketch is mostly constrained. You'll see there's a lot of dimensions, a lot of constraints. It says it still needs 6 constraints. If I come up here and remove a concentric constraint, sometimes, especially if it's not fully defined, which we know a best practice for sketching is to fully define your sketches, but sometimes, especially if it's somebody else's geometry, we may not completely understand what's going on. So there I just changed that dimension, And notice because I removed that concentric constraint, the hole didn't go with it. Right? So maybe I can figure that out. I know that I need to add a concentric constraint. But here let's look at the idea of synchronous sketching. So here you see move curve, offset move curve, resize curve, and delete curve. Now keep in mind I do have a lot of constraints on this. So if I come up here and grab this hole, just like synchronous modeling, it's going to look for design intent. In Move Face and the 3D tools, you probably are familiar with it where it says use face finder. Here we're looking at curves. So here you see that these holes, or these circles I should say, are symmetric. These across the way are symmetric. I could also pick up that they're concentric. And this is being picked up whether there's a constraint or not. Right? This could just be dumb curves attached with no geometry. Remember, I moved this concentric constraint over here, but the face finder, or I'm sorry, the curve finder inside of synchronous modeling is picking up that that circle is sitting at the center point of that arc. So I can come over here and start to pull that out, and notice how those particular rules, the finder rules, are maintaining that geometry. Now the way this works, if you have a dimension, it's going to maintain the dimension when you move, meaning it's going to rebind, so the value would change, but it's not going to remove the dimension. That's what I mean by that. And where the geometry can rebind a constraint, it will. Okay. Let's come up here and do another change. If I grab this one, I got this line symmetrically across. If I go ahead and move that up, hit apply, you see we made that change. What about this shape in the middle? It looks like some kind of maybe even locking mechanism or something that would slide in there. Well, right now it has this vertical orientation. What if I want to change it 90 degrees? Well, maybe I don't even have an angle dimension to drive that. What I can do is come in here and window select around those curves, say where do I want the handle to be, and then just start to rotate that 2D geometry. Notice how it maintained these dimensions. It maintains dimensions and constraints where it makes sense, right? If that still has its dimension, parent dimension tie there. Okay, so we just quickly made a change. Now, what if this was completely dumb, meaning there's no dimensions, which I'm going to get rid of. I'm also going to come up here and use the NX tool to remove constraints. So I'm just going to get rid of all the constraints. So I'm even getting rid of key point connections, right? There's no dimensions on this. I can move this geometry wherever I want. Let me go ahead and undo that to put it back in its place. So it's dumb, for lack of a better term. If I come in here and do the same thing now, if I pick that, see how it's still picking up symmetry and that it's concentric and that it has an equal radius, and I can go ahead and move that out, type in a value, and see how it maintains my shape. Same thing with this guy like we did earlier. If I change that symmetric, see how we can make that change. Same thing with the feature in the center. I rotated it kind of to the right. Maybe I actually needed to rotate it to the left. Right, so I quickly made that change. Notice how everything's still together. It still has the design intent as the sketch geometry sat. Now you may be looking at that and saying, well, that's geometry that I created in NX. Why would I use that? Okay, and obviously you can still continue to use all your sketch methods. There's just sometimes that might make it a little more flexible to edit, especially how we rotated that center item. But where you may use it more is something like this. Right? I have this DXF. I'm going to bring it into NX. Right? You can see the preview of it. I'm going to bring it into modeling. Okay, so I have this curve geometry in here. I'm going to go ahead and create a sketch. And then I'm going to add these curves to my sketch. So I'm just using the add existing curves. So now all that 2D geometry is on my sketch. Okay? Now there's no dimensions, there's no constraints, it's just 2D geometry. But I need to make some changes. So if I come up here and grab this hole, I can pick up that it's concentric to that arc. If I need to move that around, notice how the adjacent geometry based on those rules are updating. If I come in here, you'll notice this arc. Maybe I need this arc associated with that hole or concentric with that hole. If I just move it over there, you see how now the arc's concentric with the hole. Maybe I need to grab both these lines and rotate those lines about the center point of this circle. So it's taking the ideas that we've had with synchronous modeling from a 3D perspective, and we're doing it in a 2D perspective. I grab both these lines and these what would be pockets, and I start to pull that down. Notice how I can make that adjustment. We haven't looked at some of the other tools. We've just done move curve, but what about offset? So here I have connected curves as my filter. See how it picks up this connected string. I can go ahead and offset that 3 millimeters. The other one here is resize curve. Maybe I need to change the diameter, or in this case the radius of some of these. I can come in and find equal radius, right? So if I grab this, see how it picks up the equal radius wherever those may be, and I can actually type and make changes to those based on my curve finder rules. The other thing I want to point out is the delete curve. So the delete curve behaves just like delete face. It has to heal and stitch, so to speak. So in 3D, when you delete a face, it has to heal and stitch the model, right, to be able to delete the face. Here, you'll see if I come in here and I pick just this line, it can't delete this line. It just wants it to be, you know, a missing segment. Yes, I can select it and hit delete, but the delete curve is trying to heal it. So what I need to do is go ahead and window select or select all those curves and see how it's able to heal that as a line. It's just like if that was in a 3D and you're trying to remove that pocket, then you'd have to delete all the faces to be able to heal that. If I come over here and do another delete, same idea up here. Right? If I come up and window select around those three, notice how it's able to heal and stitch. I shouldn't say heal and stitch, but is able to heal that line. So there's an example where we brought in imported geometry, geometry that wasn't parametric. We need to make some quick changes, so we used the 2D synchronous tools. As I mentioned, there's more what's new in those areas than what I showed you today. Make sure NX9 help is installed, and you can go to help what's new guide and check out more information. Like I said, on May 22nd we'll be doing part 2 of our lunch bites. So there's the agenda for what we're going to do on May 22nd. We're going to continue on into the sheet metal environment. We'll look at some new assembly tools, drafting, a lot of new enhancements with drafting, how the dimensions look, all the styles, nice little dialogues that come up to help us edit those, and then some other items. So that's the agenda for May 22nd. As always, you can find our replays on our website and upcoming topics. If you need to suggest a topic, there's a place on our website there as well. Upcoming training offerings at Ally PLM. You see the classes for Essentials for CAD and CAM. If you need more information, go to our website. Thank you for your attention this afternoon. I hope you found this session informative. Please let us hear your suggestions. You can send those via email or, like I said, on our website there on our Lunch Bites page. Appreciate your time. Let us know if you have any questions. And remember, we'll conclude with part 2 for what's new in NX9 CAD on May 22nd. Thanks and have a great afternoon.